Welcome to the channel as we start another story from the Creepy Tales playlist. In the darkness, stories take shape. Some are whispered from the shadows. Others echo from places you should never go. These are the echoes of the unknown. Tales of horror, suspense, and fear that lingers. Because sometimes the scariest stories are the ones you can't explain. The ones you don't want to know exist. Let's begin. The town of Hollow Ridge nestled quietly among the mountains, a forgotten dot beneath thick, twisting forests. But lately, the nights had changed. The stars were gone, swallowed by an endless, suffocating darkness. Even the moon was a pale, ghostly disk, its light a faint, shivering glow that barely touched the rooftops. The mist was always there now, cold, swirling, pressing against the trees, creeping along the empty streets. The darkness seemed heavier, a thick, smothering void that pressed against the windows. And somewhere beyond it, just beyond the edge of sight, was a sound. It began as a faint, low hum, a slow, rhythmic drone that seemed to shiver against the bones. Those who walked alone at night would pause, listening, feeling that faint, cold dread crawl along their skin. But no one could say where it came from. It was just there. Nate and Jessica were the first to vanish. A young couple, laughing as they strolled down the forest path under the empty sky. Their friends warned them not to go. "It's too dark, too thick out there." But they laughed, brushed off the fear, and stepped into the mist. They never came back. The searchers found nothing, no footprints, no broken branches. Just an empty path swallowed by the thick, cold fog. The sheriff told their parents they must have gotten lost. But the whispers began. The hushed, anxious murmurs of those who walk the dark streets at night. "The sky's wrong, the stars are gone." Eleanor Graham was the first to notice it, truly notice it. An elderly woman who had lived in Hollow Ridge her entire life, she remembered clear nights full of stars, the moonlight silver against the mountains. But now, the sky was a thick, lightless void. Even the brightest stars were gone. She spoke of it to anyone who would listen. "It's not just mist. The stars, they're gone. Something's taken them." Most dismissed her words, laughing nervously, brushing it off as paranoia. But at night those who dared look up felt it, a faint, crawling dread. The sheriff organized a search party for Nate and Jessica, their flashlights carving weak, pale beams through the mist. The forest was a thick, tangled darkness, the mist swirling around their boots. Tom, one of the searchers, paused, his light shaking. "Do you hear it?" he whispered. The others stopped, listening. At first, there was only silence. But then, a faint, low hum. Slow. Rhythmic. A sound that seemed to pulse against the trees. Tom's beam flickered, and just for an instant he saw it, something twisting above the treetops. A dark, pulsing shadow that coiled and stretched, then melted into the fog. Tom returned from the forest pale and shaken. His flashlight trembled in his grip, his breath a quick, sharp rasp. "It's not just fog, it's moving," he whispered, his voice a thin, desperate rasp. The others laughed it off. "Nerves," they said. The mist always played tricks in the moonlight. But Tom knew what he saw, something twisting above the trees, pale and dark, pulsing like a mass of tangled limbs. That night, his wife woke to find him standing at the window, his face pale, his eyes wide. "They're there, twisting, watching, they don't like the light," he whispered, his gaze locked on the starless sky. In the morning, Tom was gone. His wife's screams echoed through the sleepy street, and neighbors rushed to help. His boots were still by the door. His flashlight lay on the windowsill, the battery dead. But he was gone, no footprints, no trail. Just a thick, empty mist pressing against the window. The sheriff tried to calm her, his voice steady, but his own eyes flicked nervously to the sky. The hum was fainter during the day, but it was there, always there, a faint, low drone that seemed to press against the air. Hollow Ridge became a town of locked doors and whispered fears. The nights were darker, the mist thicker. The sky was an empty, starless void, a suffocating blackness that seemed to lean closer with each passing night. Streetlights flickered, their pale beams swallowed by the fog. Teenagers spoke of the sky things, twisting shadows they claimed to see above the rooftops, writhing like coiled smoke. Some laughed, daring each other to step outside after dark. But those who tried never went far. Eleanor's warnings grew desperate. Don't look up. Don't listen. It's not just mist. It's them. But the sheriff dismissed her, his voice stern, but his eyes never left the road, the darkness pressing against the trees. But that night, Eleanor saw it, through her window, as the mist twisted across her garden. A dark, writhing shape, pale and thin, twisting above the rooftops. It coiled, stretched, then melted into the darkness. Her hand trembled as she pulled the curtains tight, her breath a faint, shallow gasp. But the hum pressed against her ears, a slow, hungry drone that seemed to vibrate against her bones. Curiosity turned to fear, but some were still drawn to the darkness, young and foolish, desperate to prove their bravery. A group of teenagers dared each other to walk the forest trail at midnight, their flashlights pale and weak against the thick mist. Their laughter was thin, nervous, swallowed by the cold air. But as they ventured deeper, the hum began, a faint, slow drone that seemed to throb beneath their feet. The mist thickened, twisting between the trees. "Come on, it's just fog," one of them laughed. But Maggie at the back paused. Her light caught something, a dark, writhing shape above the trees. A twisted, pale form that seemed to coil and stretch. She screamed, but the others laughed, until the hum grew louder. A slow, rhythmic pulse that seemed to press against their chests. The mist twisted, dark shapes swirling just out of sight. They ran, their laughter turning to frantic screams. But when they burst onto the main road, Maggie was gone. The next morning, her parents begged the sheriff for answers. But the forest was empty. Only the mist remained, thick and suffocating. And those who stood beneath the starless sky felt it, the cold, crawling dread, the hum pressing against their ears. Silence gripped the bathroom, thick and smothering. Deborah leaned against the sink, her breath a faint, quick gasp. But then it came, a low, dull thud. A heavy, muffled sound, like something stepping quietly but deliberately in the hallway. Her heart raced, her pulse a frantic drumbeat against her chest. Another thud, slow, deliberate. Her eyes locked on the door, the thin line of darkness beneath it an empty void. "Michael?" she whispered, her voice cracking. But the darkness didn't answer. The footsteps continued, slow, dragging. One step. Then another. Each one a soft, muted impact that seemed to press against her ears. Her knees trembled, her fingers tightening against the cold porcelain of the sink. The darkness beneath the door seemed to shift, a faint, pale shadow stretching across the floor, then vanishing. The footsteps stopped. Silence settled, suffocating. But she knew it was still there, just outside the door. Waiting. The overhead light trembled, a faint, steady buzz. Deborah's eyes darted to the ceiling, her reflection a pale, distorted blur in the flickering glow. The shadows danced, stretching across the mirror, her own wide, terrified eyes staring back at her. The light steadied, but the cold grew sharper, sinking into her skin. Her fingers were numb, her breath a faint, visible mist. The mirror fogged again, but the steam twisted into faint, swirling shapes, almost like fingers, clawing at the glass. Her phone remained dead, a useless weight in her palm. "Please, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. But the house was silent. The darkness beneath the door seemed thicker, pressing closer. The light flickered again, the pale glow stuttering. And in that brief darkness, she thought she saw something, just behind her reflection. A faint, shadowy shape, too thin, too tall. But when the light returned, she was alone. A faint, slow scratching echoed from the hallway. Deborah's breath caught, her pulse a sharp, painful beat. The sound was soft, deliberate, like claws dragging against the wall. It moved, sliding along the outside of the door, slow and steady. Her gaze stayed locked on the door, her back pressed against the cold tiles. The scratching continued, a slow, rhythmic scrape. But then it stopped. Silence. She leaned forward, her breath a faint, trembling rasp. Nothing. But then it came again, faster this time, like something trying to claw its way in. Her fingers fumbled for the cabinet beneath the sink, pulling out a small bottle of hairspray. Useless, but it felt like something. Stop, please stop, she whispered, her voice cracking. But the scratching grew louder, more frantic, a faint, desperate scraping against the door. The cold air felt sharper now, her skin prickling, her breath visible in the freezing room. The scratching stopped, but the silence was worse. Deborah's breath came in short, sharp gasps, her gaze fixed on the door. But then the handle twitched, a slow, faint movement. Her knees buckled, but she forced herself to stand, the hairspray clutched in her trembling hand. The handle twisted again, a slow, deliberate turn. But the lock held, the metal bolt cold and secure. Relief washed over her, but only for a moment. The handle turned again, more forceful now, a slow, steady pressure that never quite broke the lock. Michael? She whispered, her voice a choked, desperate rasp. But the house was silent. Her own pulse was a frantic drumbeat in her ears. The handle fell still, hanging limp. But then a faint, low rustling returned, just outside the door. A slow, rhythmic shuffle, like something pacing back and forth. Her legs felt weak, her fingers white against the cold metal of the sink. Deborah's breath trembled, her knees pressed against her chest, her back against the cold tiles. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Her eyes never left the door, the pale line of darkness beneath it an empty void. But then she saw it, a faint, pale mist drifting beneath the door. Her heart seized, her breath a rapid, shallow gasp. The mist twisted, curling like smoke, then dissipated. But the cold grew sharper, her skin prickling, the air heavy with a damp, earthy scent. She leaned forward, her breath fogging the air. But then she heard it, a faint, slow breath. Not her own. Low, almost wet, like something struggling to breathe. Her pulse hammered, her eyes wide. The breath came again, slow, rasping, a faint, ragged inhale. Her fingers tightened around the hairspray can, her grip shaking. Her voice was a faint, desperate whisper. Please, please leave. But the breath continued steady, just beyond the door. The faint, ragged breath continued, soft, wet, just beyond the door. Deborah's fingers tightened around the cold hairspray can, her knees drawn to her chest. The mist beneath the door had vanished, but the air felt thick, cold, pressing against her. But then it changed. The slow, rasping breath twisted, becoming something else, a faint, distorted murmur. A whisper. Too quiet to understand, but there, pressed against the other side of the door. Deborah's ears strained, her breath caught in her chest. The whisper rose, a faint, rhythmic mutter, like words clawing at the edge of speech but never forming. A low, wet rasp that grew louder, pressing against the thin wood. No, no, please, she whispered, her voice cracking. Her knees pressed tighter against her chest, her gaze locked on the door handle. But it stayed still. Locked. Secure. But the whisper never stopped, a slow, thick murmur that seemed to wrap around her, pressing against her ears. Deborah squeezed her eyes shut, her fingers trembling. It's not real, it's just my mind, just a bad dream, she whispered. But the whisper grew louder, a slow, heavy murmur that rose and fell, an unintelligible chorus clawing at the thin door. Her breath quickened, her gaze darting to the mirror. Her reflection was pale, ghostly, her wide eyes staring back. But then something else, a faint, dark shape behind her, tall, twisted, fading into the fogged glass. She spun, but the bathroom was empty. Her breath came in rapid, ragged gasps, the cold air pressing against her throat. The whisper never stopped, a low, thick rasp that seemed to press against the door, multiple voices, a distorted, tangled chorus. Her fingers clawed at the cold tiles, her voice a desperate plea. Please, please go away. But the whisper only grew louder, desperate, the muffled voices rising, twisting around her. The light overhead flickered again, the pale glow trembling. Deborah's reflection blurred, her pale, wide eyes flickering in and out. But as the light steadied, she saw it, something in the mirror. The fog swirled, twisting, and the shadow appeared again, tall, crooked, leaning over her reflection. Its face was a pale, distorted smear, eyes dark and hollow, twisting as though straining against the glass. Her breath caught, and she spun, but the bathroom was empty. She stumbled back, her gaze locked on the mirror. The shape twisted, clawed hands pressing against the glass, but the reflection remained a pale, fogged blur. The whisper was a faint, frantic chorus now, pressing against the door. Her fingers fumbled for the cabinet, pulling it open, grabbing anything, makeup brushes, a toothbrush, anything to feel less helpless. But then the light flickered, and in the brief darkness, the shadow in the mirror seemed to press closer. The whisper rose, a frantic, distorted moan that clawed at the door. The handle twisted sharply, a loud, violent rattle. Deborah screamed, stumbling back, her fingers slipping against the cold tiles. The lock held, but the handle shook, twisted, and then slammed against the door. "Michael! Please!" she screamed, her voice cracking. But the house was silent, the darkness beyond the door an empty void. The whisper became a frantic, garbled roar, still unintelligible, but desperate, clawing at the door, a twisted, overlapping chorus of faint, distorted voices. The mirror's fog thickened, her own pale reflection barely visible. But the shadow was there, tall, twisted, pressing against the glass, clawed fingers raking against the mist. The light flickered wildly, the shadows twisting across the walls. The handle shook violently, but the lock held, the metal bolt trembling. Her pulse was a frantic, painful hammer in her chest. And then the whisper changed, fainter, thinner, like a chorus fading into the distance. The door handle fell still. Silence. Deborah's chest heaved, her pulse a faint, rapid flutter. The silence pressed against her ears, thick and smothering. Her eyes stayed locked on the door, still, the pale light beneath it a thin, steady line. But something was wrong. The air was too cold, her breath a faint, visible mist. Her gaze flicked to the mirror, but the fog was gone. Her reflection was clear, pale, wide-eyed, hair tangled. But behind her, the shadow remained, tall, twisted, its clawed fingers pressed against the glass. Deborah's voice was a thin, trembling whisper. It's still." The lights went out. Total darkness. Her breath came in short, desperate gasps. She scrambled for her phone, but the screen was dead, cold beneath her fingers. Then a faint, soft glow, her phone screen, flickering to life. But the time was wrong, 5:30 a.m. Then it changed, 5:31. 5:32. The numbers spun faster, twisting, blurring. The light overhead flickered back on. Her reflection was gone. But the shadow was still there, pressed against the glass, its dark, clawed fingers twisted, its pale, empty face straining against the fogged surface. A slow, distorted whisper echoed, thick, faint, clawing at the walls. But then it stopped. Silence. The door handle twisted one last time, slow, deliberate. And then, with a soft, sharp click, the lock released. The door swung open, the darkness beyond a thick, cold void. The world outside the restroom was gone, just a void of empty black. Deborah's breath froze, her legs refusing to move. And in the empty doorway, the darkness seemed to creep forward, silent and yearning. It hungered for the taste of fear on its lips. Next time you're home all alone, and you hear those things that go bump in the night, sometimes they are best left alone.